Kyle from St. Petersburg, Florida. I'm going to be in St. Pete in a few days. Maybe I'll see you there. Hey, Solomonster, I recently learned there was once some sort of crossover between WWE and Girls Gone Wild called Girls Gone Wild Live from Spring Break. And I'm curious whether you know the backstory behind this and how it came together. Oh, yes, I do. And what a story it is. There's a great Kevin Dunn story that came out of this show. I'm so glad I got this question. You think WWE would rather people forget about December to Dismember? Oh, this is the pay-per-view that WWE has tried to hide ever since it happened. It's like Will Smith in Men in Black with the neuralizer. Here, just look into this. It was actually co-produced by WWE and Eric Bischoff. And, for research purposes, when I got this question, I had to go back and watch parts of the show. You can find the entire thing online. The Internet Archive never forgets. Archive.org for the win. What it was an ill-fated pay-per-view. It aired on a Thursday night after SmackDown, because SmackDown used to air on Thursday nights back then. It might soon air on Thursday nights again. For those who don't know, and it's weird for me to even say that, but I guess there's a generation of kids now who wouldn't know what Girls Gone Wild was. But for those who don't know, Girls Gone Wild basically was a softcore porn company. And it was founded by Joe Francis. This was in the late 90s. They would send camera crews to spring break destinations, and they would film college-age girls being drunk and crazy, and they would get them to strip down naked on camera, take their tops off, and make out with each other, and just do all kinds of various sexual things, usually while drunk. And so it was just a wild, raunchy atmosphere. And now a lot of those girls are in their 40s with kids of their own, and they probably wish shows like this had stayed hidden away. Joe Francis has been charged with and convicted of multiple crimes over the years. Tax evasion, I know, was one of them. He was sued many times by women who claimed they were filmed without their consent. He settled a lawsuit that alleged he filmed girls that were underage as part of some of his videos. I don't think he ever actually served any jail time in the States because he fled to Mexico, which is where he still lives to this day. He lives in Mexico. He cannot be extradited back, even though the two countries have an extradition treaty, because that's only for criminal charges, not civil charges. He did serve time in a Mexican jail, though, on domestic violence charges, which is not surprising for a guy who was caught on audio choking his then-wife when she told him, "You're killing me," and he responded with, "Good, I hope you fucking die." In case you were wondering what kind of person we're talking about here. But there he was, on this pay-per-view, next to Snoop Dogg as part of the judges panel. So how it all came about is that Girls Gone Wild at the time, it was distributed by the same company that Jason Hervey worked for. Jason Hervey was an actor on a popular television show in the 80s called The Wonder Years. But he also became good friends with Eric Bischoff, and they ended up going into business together later, and they had their own production company. Little trivia note, Jason Hervey was also one of the guest judges at the very first Clash of the Champions for the famous match between Sting and Ric Flair. Since we're talking about Sting and Flair a lot these days, Jason Hervey was one of the judges for that match. Why they thought Kevin Arnold's older brother from the Wonder Years would make for a good judge, you would have to ask them. He was only 15 years old at the time. The best thing he ever did in WCW, if you got the time to go search for it, Paul Heyman cut this just vicious promo on him, and when Hervey turned to walk away, Heyman cracked him over the back of the head with that giant mobile phone that he used to carry around with him. That was great. Anyway, Joe Francis was interested in buying Playboy. He wanted to buy everything, the magazine, everything that went with it, the whole empire. Well, Vince and Linda McMahon were also interested in buying Playboy. Bruce Pritchard has talked about Vince being in negotiations to buy Playboy. This would have been right after the Attitude Era ended. So 2002, 2003, sometime around then. 2003 is when this show took place. Bischoff knew Francis also wanted to buy it, so he helped broker a meeting between the two sides. Neither side ended up buying Playboy, but what did come out of the meeting was this collaboration between WWE and Girls Gone Wild. They were going to have their own spring break pay-per-view. They had Jonathan Coachman and Stacy Keibler hosting the event. If there's one thing that could ruin a Girls Gone Wild pay-per-view, it's having to listen to Jonathan Coachman's voice for 90 minutes. There was one moment where Stacy did a tequila shot off Tori Wilson's chest and everybody went nuts. Then Tori got blasted with a chair or a stool by Nydia. Remember Nydia? She was feuding with Tori at the time. And so they started brawling. They had to be pulled apart. Test was there. He was drunk out of his mind. The rest of this was them bringing up these random girls and having them do all kinds of embarrassing things for the chance to win money. I think the top prize was $25,000. It was basically Girls Gone Wild meets Howard Stern, but with Snoop Dogg and some WWE people mixed in. And the fans were upset because they thought they were paying to see some of the divas get naked, which didn't happen. So they basically paid $20 or whatever the cost was for this show to see exactly the same thing they would see on a typical episode of SmackDown or Raw. And they hated the coach because every time things looked like they were about to get a little too explicit because there were restrictions on what they could and could not do, Coach would freak out and he would just usher them off the stage really quick and he would cut them off. But the way it worked was Bischoff and Hervey's company, they handled the production and they then paid a fee to WWE to use their cameras and their crew and some talent. And Linda McMahon thought, well, this is going to be a smashing success. This is going to be the beginning of a beautiful friendship, she thought. And they were hoping for 300,000 buys on pay-per-view for this show. They did not do anywhere close to 300,000 buys on pay-per-view for this show. And they never worked together again. Now, some people asked me after I covered the Kevin Dunn departure a few weeks ago, why do you hate Kevin Dunn? Or why does Kevin Dunn get so much hate from the IWC? There are things that he has done with WWE production that I didn't like. But my impressions of him in those rare times that he would actually appear on TV, like he was with Tough Enough, for example, coupled with what other people have said about him that have worked directly with him before, and it's not just Jim Cornette. I know Jim Cornette has been very vocal about him, but it's more than just him. He has always sounded like an all-around miserable human being. And when you talk about the way the women were treated back then and portrayed on TV, he had a lot to do with that. You know, this one's not hot enough for TV. This one needs bigger tits. Freddie Prinze Jr. worked there as a writer. He said the creative ideas for the women would often hinge on whether Kevin Dunn thought they were attractive enough or not. Some of the ideas they came up with to bury and humiliate Jim Ross came not from Vince McMahon, but from Kevin Dunn. And on and on and on. So, fuck Kevin Dunn, and fuck Johnny Ace while we're at it. He's the one who told AJ Lee the higher-ups and the fans didn't find her fuckable enough. I'm shocked that the Wall Street Journal revealed that he and Vince McMahon were trading female employees like they were baseball cards. Shocked, I tell you. You know, there are times where I ask myself, why have I spent so many years putting money in these people's pockets? I'm a wrestling fan, it's the wrestling I grew up on, but I don't really have a good justification for it beyond that. I really don't. But to wrap this up, I said I had a great Kevin Dunn story that came out of this show. Snoop Dogg showed up late that day. And Kevin Dunn was beside himself because he missed all the rehearsals, he didn't know where he was. So Snoop finally shows up, and Dunn is trying to explain to him what he is supposed to be doing that night. And Snoop is just standing there. He's puffing away on his cigar. And now Dunn is getting angrier and angrier and angrier because Snoop has not even acknowledged him. He won't even look at him. And then finally, Snoop Dogg, without even looking over in Dunn's direction, shouts, "Hey motherfucker, just because I'm not looking at you doesn't mean I'm not hearing you. I got this shit." And he walked off. Now, Bruce Pritchard claims he got phone calls from 2 different people who saw this all go down, telling him that Kevin Dunn just got punked out by Snoop Dogg in front of everybody. I wish someone would have filmed that. They could have included it in the video package for Snoop when he went into the Hall of Fame.